Hello everyone, good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much for attending this discussion. This is our first ASIS program organized by Association of Social Science Students of Triple IU, collaborate with the Faculty of Social Science. And today we are very honored. We are going to have Dr. Muhammad Fajar and Muhammad Abdul Shukri to discuss about youth and politics. Hopefully, we can learn a lot from the presenters, both academically and practically. So once we return back to our beloved country, we have a knowledge to initiate youth movement who have powerful energy to contribute to our society and political life. Okay, without further ado, I would like to ask Dr. Sirajuddin Arif, as a head of political science, to deliver his remarks. Dr. Siro, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thank you very much, Aldi, for inviting me to this event. I'm very delighted to be here. I think this is the real youth event. Now, actually, it is the young people who organize the event. And now we are the older, not the old, but the older has to follow what the young people has set up. That's really great. So I'm very happy and thanks very much for organizing this activity. So usually whenever we talk about suka saying, give me 10 youth and I'll change the world. The saying is very popular among Indonesian people, right? But I think it can be misleading if we take only the number of the youth people mentioned by Sukarno. And the fact is that during that time, Indonesian generation, Indonesian young people at that time, they participated in various activities. They have conducted many organized many organizations, not only in Indonesia, but also in the Netherlands. So learning from this spirit, I believe that the young people is the key for the development of Indonesia and also other countries. But again, the key is how to translate the spirit into the problem that we face today. So now the problems that we face is more complex than the problem faced by Sukarno and his generation, even though we believe that they face very difficult situation at that time. And the struggle that they had to face was very huge and very difficult. So if we believe that our situation is more complex, so certainly we have many things to do our homework. So I'm very happy that we have this opportunity to discuss about this problem, and I also would like to thank to Mas Abdullah Shukuri and my dear colleague Mas Fajar for participating in this event. I believe that your expertise, now we have at least from my point of view, two different perspectives. One is the head of the prominent young organization in this country, and the other is a young scholar who has learned very deeply about the role of youth in politics. So we can learn from the experience and the expertise from these two people to engage or to learn better how the young generation should deal with the current problems of politics and other social political issues. So first, once again, thank you very much, Mas Abdullah Shukuri and Mas Fajar. And Aldi has talked to me. Actually, we would like to have this discussion offline in the campus. We believe that the old days actually are better than, and some point are better than our current days from online activities. Many of us have been fatigued with the online, but unfortunately, due to the current situation, we have to conduct these activities online. But we hope that it doesn't say reduce the interest in the discussion. So once again, thank you and happy discussion. Thank you, Aldi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siro, for insightful opening speech. And I, as student president of association, we also do apologize for not being able to welcome the two presenters in person on our green campus due to the recent resurgence of the COVID-19 cases. Therefore, we need to move this event to online. Okay, to make it short, I would like to invite Saima Shamim to lead the discussion. Saima, the screen is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, on behalf of all the students and the university, I welcome our two representatives. Today we have got respected Muhammad Abdullah Sayukri and Dr. Muhammad Fajr. So, thank you for your time and thank you for coming to this event. Well, so before we proceed to let the speakers say what they have in store for us, let me give you a short intro about both the representatives. So we have got respected Muhammad Abdullah Sayukri. He is a general chairperson of Indonesian Islamic Student Movement for the Solomon period of 2021 to 2024. He was elected at the Congress in Balikpapan, East Kalimantan in 2021. And interestingly, he does not only play a role in the national arena, but also in the international arena. In addition to completing his master's education in Germany, he is also actively involved in World Peace Forum through the Thousand Abrahamic Circles Network, and is also one of the initiators of the establishment of the PMII International Branch Management PCI in 3 countries, namely Morocco, Taiwan, and Germany. He is also representative of Indonesia at the World Peace Forum in the United States and Serbia in the 1000 Abrahamic Circles program. The program was initiated to build peace among Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So, and we have also got Dr. Muhammad Fajr. He has graduated from the Department of Political Science at Northwestern in 2020. He successfully defended his dissertation, The Path to Preemption, the Politics of the Indonesian Student Movement during the regime transition 1998 to 1999. And as a 2013 Ariman Fellow, Dr. Muhammad researched democracy promotion policies in Indonesia, supported by international agencies. He received his BA in sociology from University of Indonesia, and in 2011, he received the Netherlands Fellowship Program scholarship for his master's degree at the Institute of Social Studies in Hague, specializing in governance and democracy. So as we see, we have got great representative today to talk about youth and politics. And we have known that the youth plays a great role in nation building. It has the power to help the country develop and move towards progress. So it also responsible for bringing social reform within a country. The youth of country determine the future of the nation in a new mind, so new ideas. So here we go. I hand over the time to respected Muhammad Abdullah Sayukri. So sir, please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Saima, Shamim, and Aldi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, and it's such an honor for me to be invited by Universitas Islam International Indonesia. Actually, I would love to visit the campus because I consider to take my doctoral degree there after maybe after 2034. Okay, actually, before I start my presentation, I would like to show you the video of our organization profile, but it's in Bahasa Indonesia. Maybe for the next step, we can translate it in English. Please, Aldi, maybe you can show our video to all attendants. The profile of Pergerakan Mahasiswa Islam Indonesia.
Could I share my
There is no sound. Maybe you can fix it, Aldi. Okay, is there any trouble?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Kalangan mahasiswa di Indonesia. Pergerakan mahasiswa Islam Indonesia dideklarasikan pada 17 April 1960 di Gedung Madrasah Muallimin Nahdlatul Ulama, Wonokromo, Surabaya oleh 13 mahasiswa NU dari berbagai daerah. Sahabat Khalid Mawardi, sahabat Said Budairi, sahabat Sobih Ubaid, sahabat Ma'mun Syukri, sahabat Hilman Badruddin Syah, sahabat Ismail Maki, sahabat Munsif Nahrawi, sahabat Nuril Huda Suaidi, sahabat Laili Mansur, sahabat Abdul Wahab Jailani, sahabat Hizbullah Huda, sahabat Khalid Narbuko, dan sahabat Ahmad Hussein, serta terpilihnya sahabat Mahbub Junaidi sebagai ketua umum pertama. PMII dibentuk karena kegelisahan dan keinginan yang kuat di kalangan intelektual muda NU untuk mendirikan organisasi mahasiswa sendiri sebagai wadah penyaluran aspirasi, pengembangan potensi, serta aktualisasi diri kalangan mahasiswa NU untuk mendirikan organisasi mahasiswa yang berideologi Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah. Sebagai organisasi kemahasiswaan, posisi PMII menjadi wadah strategis sebagai kaderisasi NU di berbagai daerah di Indonesia. Hal ini terbukti kehadiran PMII yang mampu mewarnai berbagai aktivitas mahasiswa dalam lintas zaman. Dengan nilai-nilai Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah dan asas Pancasila, PMII bertekad membawa peradaban baru untuk agama dan bangsa. PMII selalu berusaha berperan dalam setiap perubahan yang ada di masyarakat. Dengan tujuan terbentuknya pribadi Muslim Indonesia yang bertakwa kepada Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, berbudi luhur, berilmu, cakap dan bertanggung jawab dalam mengamalkan ilmunya, serta komitmen memperjuangkan cita-cita kemerdekaan Indonesia, PMII telah mengabdi, menjadi pelaku sejarah, menjadi bagian dari perubahan sosial yang ada di masyarakat. Sejak didirikan, PMII tidak hanya hadir dalam berbagai forum nasional, melainkan juga berbagai forum internasional. Kongres pertama PMII pada Desember 1961 di Tawangmangu, Surakarta, Jawa Tengah, PMII telah memiliki 13 cabang yang tersebar di Indonesia, yaitu cabang Yogyakarta, cabang Surakarta, cabang Semarang, cabang Bandung, cabang Jakarta, cabang Ciputat, cabang Malang, cabang Makassar, cabang Surabaya, cabang Banjarmasin, cabang Padang, cabang Banda Aceh, dan cabang Cirebon. Selain itu, PMII menunjukkan komitmennya untuk selalu berpihak pada rakyat melalui dokumen penegasan Yogyakarta pada saat Kongres PMII kedua di Yogyakarta. Salah satu momentum sejarah perjalanan PMII yang membawa perubahan besar pada perjalanan PMII adalah dicetuskannya independensi PMII pada tanggal 14 Juli 1972 di Murna Jatilawang, Malang, Jawa Timur, yang kemudian kita kenal dengan Deklarasi Murna Jati. Independensi ini menjadi sikap politik PMII yang tidak ingin terpengaruh oleh kondisi partai politik yang semakin dikebiri pada masa Orde Baru. Independensi gerakan oleh PMII terus dipertahankan dan dipertegas dalam penegasan Cibogo pada 8 Oktober 1989. Independensi ini adalah bentuk respon PMII terhadap pembangunan dan modernitas bangsa dengan menjunjung tinggi nilai dan moral serta idealisme yang didasari oleh ajaran Islam Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah. Hingga hari ini, PMII selalu memperjuangkan berbagai masalah umat. Dalam nilai dasar pergerakan, PMII berupaya untuk selalu mengagungkan nilai Ahlus Sunnah wal Jamaah dengan nilai kemerdekaan, persamaan, keadilan, toleransi, serta nilai perdamaian. Sejak berdiri hingga saat ini, PMII telah dipimpin oleh 17 ketua umum. Sahabat Mahbub Junaidi tahun 1960 hingga 1967. Sahabat Muhammad Zamroni 1967 hingga 1973. Sahabat Abdul Padare 1973 hingga 1977. Sahabat Ahmad Bagja 1977 hingga 1981. Sahabat Muhyiddin Arubusman 1981 hingga 1984. Surya Dharma Ali 1985 hingga 1988. Sahabat Muhammad Iqbal Asegaf 1988 hingga 1991. Sahabat Ali Mashkur Musa 1991 hingga 1994. Sahabat Muhaimin Iskandar 1994 hingga 1997. Sahabat Syaiful Bahri Ansori 1997 hingga tahun 2000. Sahabat Nusron Wahid tahun 2000 hingga 2003. Sahabat Abdul Malik Haramain 2003 hingga 2005. Sahabat Heri Herianto Azumi 2005 hingga 2008. Sahabat Muhammad Rodi Kailani 2008 hingga 2011. Sahabat Adin Jauharudin 2011 hingga 2014. Sahabat Aminuddin Ma'ruf 2014 hingga 2017. Sahabat Agus Mulyono Herlambang 2017 hingga 2021. Dan sahabat Muhammad Abdullah Syukri 2021 hingga 2024. Sahabat Abdullah Syukri atau yang biasa dikenal dengan sahabat AB terpilih oleh Kongres PMII pada tanggal 25 Maret 2021 di Balikpapan. Di bawah kepemimpinan sahabat AB, PB PMII mengusung visi besar yaitu transformasi organisasi untuk PMII maju dan mendunia.
Okay, thank you, Aldi, for showing us the video of our profile, Indonesian Islamic Student Movement or PMII, Pergerakan Mahasiswa Islam Indonesia. And also thank you for Pak Fajar and Pak Sirojudin, who also together with us here in a webinar to discuss what is our role in political system in Indonesia. Okay, I give a simple PowerPoint to Aldi as well. Maybe you can show us, and it's actually the simple one because it's just to guidance our discussion. But after that, we can discuss openly, not only what were written in the PowerPoint. As you see on the video, you already know what is PMI, Pergerakan Mahasiswa Islam Indonesia. Maybe it's not only the one youth or student organization in Indonesia. You can see a lot of youth organization like, for example, Himpunan Mahasiswa Islam, HMI, or kami, Kesatuan Aksi Mahasiswa Muslim Indonesia. Also, we are Muslim, but we have a different ideology, and also we have different background in terms of culture and history. And also, for example, another example is GMNI, Gerakan Mahasiswa Nasionalis Indonesia, the nationalist student movement. They are nationalists, and you can also see other organization like PMKRI. It's for Catholic student, or GMKI for Christian student. Okay, so as you see that we have a long history since our establishment in 1960. So our age is now 62 years old. So we are basically one of the oldest youth organization in Indonesia. And at the time, we only had 13 branches in Indonesia, but by today we have 240 branches in cities in Indonesia, and also in all provinces in Indonesia. And now our active member, we have 2 million active member, and also million alumni as well. Okay, so in general like that, and of course we are one of prominent organization in Indonesia, because although we are not part of Nahdlatul Ulama structurally, but we have the same value, we have the same culture with Nahdlatul Ulama. Nahdlatul Ulama is, as you know, that it is the largest Muslim organization in Indonesia, even in the world. So we are the youth or the student organization of them. At 1960, we were part of Nahdlatul Ulama, but after 1917, we decided to being independent in terms of structure. But the value, the culture, we are the same, just for the management of organization, because there is a story of the transition power from the old order, Sukarno, to new order, Suharto. Okay. When we are talking about the history of PMI in the story of politics of Indonesia, of course, we are so active in the politics agenda, but not practically like we are part of executive or legislative, of course. Maybe in political theory, you can say we are the interest group, or we are the civil society group, but in the youth sector. And also the strategy of our organization, how we face the situation. Please, previous slide. Of course, different across the time, because it depends on the situation of the country. For example, in the Orde Lama, or the old order led by Sukarno, when our organization was established, the movement strategy is different. Our first general chairman is a journalist, Mr. Mahbub Junaidi. And at the time, the situation is also difficult for young people, because the political identity is very strong. We have to claim who we are. For example, if you're nationalist, you have to say, I'm nationalist. If you are a part of military, for example, you have to say strongly, I'm part of military. Or if you are a nationalist or communist, I'm communist. If you are for example, santri, in Nahdlatul Ulama, I'm santri. It is of course different with today, when people not really aware of political identity, but somehow in 2019 and also maybe in 2024 it happens again. Who knows? But at the time we have to claim who we are strongly. That's why the movement of Pergerakan Mahasiswa Islam Indonesia is identified by cultural movements. And also we have to claim also we are part of Nahdlatul Ulama. We are the young Nahdlatul Ulama. So that was our identity, and also until now, we are moderate. We are proud of tolerance and also balancing power and loyal to nation. It has been our identity until now. And also at the time, what was our movement? Because our general chairman was the journalist, so we also strongly doing journalism movement. Our member at the time liked to write something in media, but there was no media social at the time, so they write it in daily news or in newspaper, something like that. Yeah, that was the situation at old order, PMI in the Orde Lama. Then I moved to Orde Baru, the new order, led by Suharto. Maybe all of you must know who is him, the second president of Indonesia. And Suharto regime is so powerful, you know. So we decided to did underground movement because, for example, if at the time if we wanted to do discussion or seminar, we have to get a permit from the military office at that region, for example. And there is always somebody who being let's say the spy. So it was not free movement at the time. That's why it was easy to see our member to get caught in the prison at the time, and it was not easy to do a demonstration at the time. So we got strong repression at the time because the government they wanted to create a situation that no power except the military, the bureaucracy, and the gold card. And as you know, that the biggest opposition at the time is Nahdlatul Ulama, and PMI is part of Nahdlatul Ulama culturally. So that's why we also got the same repression like Nahdlatul Ulama at the time. Because the entire resistance movement is monitored by the country. So we were the opposition at the time, but then our hard work paid off in 1990s, the time of reformation in 1998, together with the with other youth organizations. PMI became one of the significant actors who doing demonstration to overthrow the Suharto government. That's was the situation in New Order to 300. Yeah. Wait. Yeah, around 32 years under Suharto regime. It was hard situation for all activists in Indonesia, including Pergerakan Mahasiswa Islam Indonesia. And then moved to Reformation, because we were part of the Reformation movement. At the time, it was the situation of democracy transition, and mostly our member or our senior or our alumni, they are creating or they are being part of NGO. So most of our member being non-governmental organization who has different interests, like in human right or in gender or in in agrarian issues or something like a lot of our member being part of NGO. Because why they do that? Because at the time there is a gap between the government and the people. There is a gap, so that's why we positioned ourselves as in Indonesian term is like penyambung lidah rakyat. It's like we are the mediator between the people and between the government at the time, because we until now we have been doing trial and error of building our democracy. And then now the situation, the era has been changing. We are living in disruption era, in revolution technology 4.0, industrial revolution 4.0. And all organizations, including PMI, have to change their strategy how to still engage into political activity in Indonesia. That's why we now not only talking about politics, about movement in terms of demonstration, or in terms of we are the activists of NGO being the mediator from people to the government, but we also now talking about the technocracy issue, how to produce our member to be a professional, for example, to be a lawyer, to be a business analyst, to be entrepreneur, because we have to combine that. We have belief in our value in terms of religion and also in terms of nation value, but we have to develop our organization based on professionality by now. So it's totally different, our activity today in May 2020s compared to previous era, for example. So we still discuss, we still teach our member about Islamic values, about national values, cultural values, and they are strengthening each other. But in the same time, we do a lot of, personal development or community development for our member. Because it's not enough to just having a huge network, but we have no skill, or we have no we have no competence, so we have to combine it all. Because at the time, for example, at the era of democracy transition, we started having our alumni to be a part of legislative. They are part of parliament in national level or in regional level. And also we already have a governor, for example, or vice governor, and our alumni being some minister in Indonesia. But it gets harder now, because we have to have capital resources, but the activists normally we only doing social capital, not capital in the term of economy. That's why we have to do new strategy for being involved in political system in Indonesia. That's why, for example, in 2024, we are facing the national election in Indonesia, and it's we are not part of any political party, and they try to be talking with us, let's support us, but because we are not part of any political party, it's different. Like before, when we were still part of Nahdlatul Ulama, and Nahdlatul Ulama was political party at the time. So we are so active. So we don't restrict ourselves to be communicating to only one or two political parties. We are communicating to all, and that's yeah. Sometimes it's getting confused situation because there are a lot of interest. Yeah, to get okay PME, you have to follow us. Okay, if you follow us, yeah, you will get something like position in the next government. But then we are still idealists, and we are still believe in our value. Also, we have a huge member and network. We are still independent. That's why we are still being independent. Although we still fight for public interest or national interest, not for one or two sides, one or two political party interests. Although we have a lot of our alumni who being member of some political parties in Indonesia, but then we are not supporting a specific person or a specific political party. It's also the process of uh, our member, because all of us are still the students. So next slide. Yeah, we are still having the academic role. That's why we focus on how to build and how to develop our members to be some professional, like I said before, the technocracy issue, not only political role, not only social role, not only moral role. And when I talk to my members in the discussion or in the seminar, I said to them that we don't have to do the same thing with our previous leaders or with our previous generations when they do demonstration to create a change. For example, if there is a trouble or there is a trouble between the company or between the company and the people in some areas, for example, agrarian problem, when there is conflict, we supported the people by doing advocation, for example. And sometimes we also do demonstration to the government to support the people when they fight for the right of their land, for example. Their fight between the company, the private sector, and the people. And I said to them that, okay, that's a good thing actually, but today, what we have to do is we have to learn the knowledge and we have to learn the technology. That's why one day we will manage the natural resources, not only just being the advocator. That's why it's what we do today, not only just demonstration or just fight, but we try the new way how to learn how to manage this country, how to involve ourselves to be more active in the political system, not only just the advocator at the time, like the previous time. Next. Yeah, you can imagine that we are a big organization, and also other organization like not only PMI, HMI, GMNI, PMKRI, GMKI. You can imagine that at 10 years and 20 years after, we will be the decision maker in Indonesia. But we have to be aware, and I also tell my members, it will be different situation like 90s or in the beginning of 200, when we got easily to be involved in politics, just having social capital. but we have to also have competence, we have to have a skill, we have to capital in terms of economy. That's why I strongly to recommend my member to be entrepreneur and something like that, because the situation will be different. The government will be not fully independent because there is also the pressure from the private sector, for example. So we also try to be part of private sector, or also to create one or some companies that can be a new dimension of our cadre to do activity in the future, not only in politics. Next. Yeah, of course, what we do now is we build capacity and capability of our member in Indonesia, because we have the level of categorization. Yeah, so we have 4 levels, and we talk about nationality, we talk about religion, we talk about the current issues, economy, natural resources, and something like that. That's why what we build is dedication. So we want our member to have a high dedication to the country, because it's also their responsibility to develop this country by their own expertise, not only in politics, not only in 1 or 2 sectors. That's why now we talk about the technocracy issue. So starting by now, we have our member to be a doctor, to be a lecturer, to be entrepreneur. That's why we can be an agent of control in every policy, not only by demonstration, but also from our research, from our point of view by our institution. For example, if you are a doctor, maybe you can be writing some policy proposal for the government, for example. That's why what we do in political activity today, not only by demonstration. Next. Yeah, like Mas Sirojudin said, when Sukarno say, if the old people, they just can dream, but one young can change the world. One young person can change the world. Yeah, that's the quote from Mr. Sukarno, our proclamator in Indonesia. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you for hearing my presentation. Sorry for some distractions because I have something here about trouble, but we can still continue our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. It was quite delight to know that. And yes, your PowerPoint present that youngs are very powerful and one of the very important asset for nation building and for new ideas, to bring new movements, to bring new developments. So thank you for that. We shall go forward. And maybe the question answer session we can put at the end of both the sessions. So thank you once again. Now I would like to invite Dr. Muhammad Fajr to share with us what he has in store for us. Thank you. So Dr. Muhammad, please, the time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Shaima, for your kind introduction. First of all, before I start, I just want to thank you for for giving me the opportunity to present something that I've been working on in the last few years. So my presentation today is titled Youth Movements, Myths, and Facts. So next, before I start, I just want to say a little bit about the outline of my presentation for today. So first of all, I will describe and explain a little bit about definitions of key terms related to youth movements. And then after that, I will explain a little bit how we understand the variety within youth movements. And then I will dive into one of examples of youth movements, which is student movements. I will focus more on myths and facts around student movements. And then I will conclude my presentation. Next. Yeah, so by definitions, I understand youth movements as a political, religious, or social movement or agitation led by or consisting chiefly of youth or young people, and they usually aim at reform or revolutions. Meanwhile, what I mean by youth protests is collective actions that have characteristics such as direct actions, usually conducted outside formal political institutions, and they usually confront the political elite. My goal to explain this to definition is we need to distinguish both, because I think youth movement, they do not necessarily rely on youth protests as their tactics and strategies. If we look back on history, I think we can see so many youth movements that rely on other tactics and strategies, such as contacting their representatives in the parliament, organizing popular education for grassroots communities, and some of them even go further by employing a violent methods in their political activities. So I want you to be aware of these distinctions. Next. So I think by definition, youth itself is very loaded concept, because when you say youth, you can actually refer to many types of youth organizations, right? Like for instance, what I do here is I try to combine two axes here to see the variety of youth movements. So the horizontal axis is the ideological axis, ranges from progressive to conservative, while the vertical axis is about spatial and geographical variable. By combining these two axes, I think we already have here 4 types of youth movements: the urban conservative, the urban progressive, the rural progressive, and also the rural conservative youth movements. This is just an example, but what I want to say here is we need to be very, very careful when we use the term youth, because it can refer to many different groups with different characteristics embedded in very different social contexts. Next. So based on that logic, I want to focus more on what we already know as student movements. I choose student movements because students are first often at the forefront of major social changes, such as during regime transitions, revolutions, or other political or economic crises. Students, they also often initiate large-scale mobilizations, such as what happened in the last few years in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in Thailand, in Myanmar, and also in Indonesia. And I also choose student movement as a case because I think students have a very unique position in our society, because we usually treat them as the hope, while at the same time we also perceive them as a problem of the nations. So we love, for instance, to treat them as the group who will inherit the future of our nations. But at the same time, you also love to strict their behavior. So we always say that students cannot think like this, students cannot dress like this, and so on and so on. So based on those reasons, I think it would be very interesting to understand more about student movements, which can be the base for understand youth movements in general. My next slides will be on the myths and also the facts about student movements. So I think during my research about student movements, one of the myths that is very pervasive is students as a moral force. So what I mean by the moral force is, I think students always love to think that they are so ready to challenge the status quo, but after the politics is over, and when the politics works inside the parliament, they don't want to involve themselves further in politics because they always think politics is dirty, politics is cruel, and so on and so on. I think the concept of moral force also suggests that students, they don't want to build alliances with other social forces because they think if they join forces with other social forces like workers, peasants, or laborers, it will pollute their agenda. They tend to try to maintain the purity of their movements. Next. And I think in Indonesia, we're so very familiar with that concept of students as a moral force, and also maybe in other countries. But that's not the case if we see of the cases of student movements in other countries. Next, sorry. So if we see, for instance, could you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So if we see the history of, for instance, like a Black student movements in the US that push the agenda of civil rights, I think they were not only, they didn't start the movement as students because they also have had organizations such as NAACP as the supporter of this movement. So actually Black students, they made like a very strong alliance with civil society groups. And if you go to Egypt, if you look on the history of Egypt, especially during the Arab Springs, you can also see how Muslim Brotherhood very actively supported student protests in Tahrir Square. So this idea of moral force actually doesn't have a very strong root, at least in reality. Next. So the next myth that I always encounter during my fieldwork and also during my research is we tend to believe that student movements, they can change the world. They think they have all the power to move the world and also change the existing conditions. And we're also very used with this image, especially in Indonesia. Next, sorry. You can find, I think, in mass media or social media, the notions or the image that students actually, they can act as the creator of change. They can perform like social control. They can act as a moral force and so on and so on. But I think that's not the case if you see the cases of student movements in other countries, because if you see, for instance, the student movements in during the Tiananmen protests, it is true that they managed to gather, for instance, like millions of people, of workers in the Tiananmen Square. But in the end of the day, they hardly changed anything. The communist regime was still intact, and they persisted, and it just proved the failure of student movements to change the world. And if you also see the Hong Kongese student movements, they also managed to gather like millions of people from 2014 until now, but they hardly changed anything to resist the intervention of the Chinese government in Hong Kong. But besides the myths that I found during my research and during my fieldwork, I think there are also some facts there about student movements. Next. So the first fact that I always find, at least in the literature, also in my fieldwork, is that students are the pace setter. So by pace setter, I mean it. Students, they always start movements, but they do not necessarily the one that ends the movements. I think this is because the nature of students themselves. I think there are like two natures of student movements that can give them this capacity to be the pace setter. The first is, I think most of the students, they live nearby among the, so it makes them easier to organize among themselves. It's easier for them to plan about what they want to do in the next, for instance, protests or meetings with the politicians and so on. And I think this is also another nature about student movements is because they have free time to organize. I mean, if you are students, maybe you only spend like, I don't know, around 2 to 4 hours in the classes. And then after that, you have free time to talk among yourselves and then try to organize something. That, I think those two natures of students makes them are more capable of mobilizing people. I think that's sorry, could you go to the previous, and yes, this one, the previous one. I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. I think if you see the history of Indonesia in the last few years, I think you already recognize the role of students to start off large-scale protests, like for instance, what happened during 2019 in Yogyakarta. I think it was all started in Yogyakarta and then it spread out to other cities in Indonesia, like Jakarta, Makassar, and other big cities. And this is also the pattern that was followed by Indonesian student movements in 1998, when they already protested the authoritarian regime since the late 80s, and then it culminated as a large-scale mobilizations that brought down Suharto in May 1998. And I think this pattern is also true in other countries. Next. For instance, if you see the role of Myanmar student movements in 2021, I believe. So I think in 2021, after the military junta launched a coup, I think students became the first social group that organized and initiated street protests. And this is the same case like what happened in Thailand in 2019. After they thought that the election was rigged, they became the first social group that initiated large-scale mobilizations against the regimes. The second fact that I always found the second fact that I always found about about student movement is student movements are actually temporary movements, because I think this is shaped by the nature of students themselves, because you only become students for like, I don't know, around 4 to 6 years or 7 years. And after that, you have to graduate and you have to find a job and so on and so on. And I think because of this the nature of the student movements, I think student movements, they have very narrow window to exercise their power and also drive changes. That's all because the status as students is very temporary. And it's, I think it's very different with other social movements, such as, for instance, peasants or women. I mean, you cannot cease to be women, right, if you're involved in women movements. That's not the case for student movements, which are very temporary. Next. And I think our history proves that you can see the transition of student activists from their time as activists on the street to their roles now as politicians. For instance, I think some of you who come from Indonesia, I think you're familiar with these faces. I think this guy, all of them are former student activists back in 1998, but now they transitioned, they transition into like politicians in our parliament, which actually proves the transitory status of students. Next. And I think that's also true to the experience of student activists in other contexts. This guy is, his name is Tom Hayden, by the way. He's the leader of SDS, the Student for Democratic Society, that led the student movements in 1960s in the US. So after he led the movement, he, I think, became one of the politicians within the Democratic Party. Next. And I think the last one, this guy is now pretty much very famous. His name is Gabriel Boric, for you who don't know him. He, back in 2011, he was a leader of student protests against the neoliberalizations of higher educations in Indonesia. And I think he becomes a success story of the transition of student activists into politicians, because I think in this year, he won the election to become the Chilean president. Next, so what I want to say in my very short presentation is, I think we need to situate youth movement in their context, including to understand their nature, their similarities, their differences. So if we can understand how to situate youth movement in their context, I think we can understand better their limitations and potentials to bring changes. I think that's it from me. I know maybe I missed some details or important things, but I would be more than happy to answer your questions during the Q&A sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. First. That was very important point that you have conveyed to us. And yes, student, if we see historically in the time of crisis, student activism has been a very important force for social change, and students around the world have been at the forefront of movements to promote the democracy and human rights because of the new ideas and the power and the activeness in them. So students movement have toppled the powerful dictatorship and military groups. Student movement sometimes also have ended the wars. Well, so there we come to the end of this session. So I request if anyone have questions, please come up with your questions. Yes, Aldi.
Yes, it is intriguing topic that we can know that the role of student movement or youth movement is really being fruitful in the middle of society. But as conventional wisdom said that the middle class is always at the front of political change. So, but several studies also say that the middle class also has the potential to be co-opted by the authoritarian regime or the authoritarian government. Thus, the role of students is the only one that can be relied on this context, right? However, if I look at the current phenomenon, the student movement has the potential to be co-opted and the brain movement castrated. Like, what are the weaknesses of the student movement in today's era? What I would like to ask, and especially in today's digital era, and then how the relationship between a student and the middle class is currently in the current era to propose political change in the society. Thank you.
So, sorry, are we going to collect the questions first, or should I answer this?
Shall I collect more than one question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are we
sure.
going to do that?
Okay, so we have Muhammad with his question. Yes, please, Muhammad.
Yes, my question about the students' movement. Always there's a divided in student movement because ideology and student movement has this disadvantages of violence, urgency, and lack of experience. How can students' movement skip this disadvantages and develop their movements to be organizations, and they can make a better point in the politicians or in the politics as all. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fajr, would you go with the answer now?
Yes, but please correct me if I don't understand the question clearly. For the first questions, I think Aldi asked something about the cooptations about student movements, right? Is that true? Yeah. So I think considering the role of students and the relative power that they have, I suggest that actually student movements, they need to be co-opted to have an impact in politics. I think this is going against the common or the popular argument that students, they don't want to be co-opted, but I think students, they need to be co-opted to have political impacts because we're talking about students. They cannot run the state, they cannot run the country, they don't know how to, for instance, I don't know, make a like a budget for states, for a state. So in that sense, I think you need to focus on something that you're good at, which is organizing people. But I think there's also the limit of student movement itself. I mean, after you can mobilize people, I don't think you need to transform your movement to become another political force, like what happened, for instance, in Hong Kong. You cannot stay on the street to have very substantial political impacts. I think, okay, what I want to say is if you want to have a very substantial impacts, you need to stop to be student movements. That's what I understand from what I studied so far. I hope that answers your question, Audi. You're laughing. The second questions, is it the same thing with the first questions, Mohammed? Or could you repeat again your question? I think it's a little bit disconnected with my internet.
Yeah, the disadvantages of student movement from violence and urgency of experience and divided by ideology. And if they can develop this movement to be more to be organizations, or as you said, it's they stop to be students movement. But how can they even in their movements they can skip this or skip this disadvantages in by nature?
At least from what I study or research so far, I think this is like a phase that you cannot bypass. I think to make like a profound impact in politics. I mean, the power of social movements, I think, comes from numbers, right? I mean, students, I don't know how many are they? I think maybe only like 100,000. I don't think you can like organize millions of students on the streets. That's why I think you need, as a student movement, you need to make coalitions with other political and social forces to become a very strong political force that can drive change. I think there's a rule of thumb from some studies that says if you can organize, for instance, like 5% of the populations, I think you can actually make some substantial changes in your society. And that's, I think that's the homework that every student activist or a social movement activist have to work on if you want to make like a substantial changes. And yeah, and I just want to reiterate my point. To have substantial impacts in politics, you really need to stop being student movements, because that's actually your limitations as social movements, to stay within your form as a student movement. I hope that answered your question, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Fajr. Are there any more questions I can take? Yes, Madillo.
Hello, good afternoon. So I see this description on youth social movements that students tend to be in the social media, in the social movements themselves, they are too divided, that instead of forging into one specific alliance or organization, they tend to be too sectarian, that they divide themselves, that this is our ideology, this is our principle. So instead of facing the common enemy or or instigating a cause, a single cause, they instead tend to be some sort of sectarian. So what is the cause of this, and does antagonism between their ranks prevent them from achieving their cause?
Well, thank you, Majello. I would like to ask Mr. Abdullah Sayukri, being the representative or being the representative of the student movement of Indonesia, can you give us a clear picture of how the old and new pattern are of Indonesian student movement is available now, how the old pattern differs from the new pattern of Indonesian student movement. So these are two questions, please.
Okay. At the same time, I also want to respond the Aldi question because it's interesting. The relation between the student and the middle class as well. Okay, if we define today if we define the student movement only by demonstration or by street parliament, I think it's too small definition. I think what we did in what our senior did in 1998, for example, when they did a protest or demonstration, they asked the government, please do something like this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Please, you give our right, something like that. And when the government ask ourselves, so what is the solution? So the solution is on you, not in our, because we have no any power in the government. But now, after the Reformation, our members started to be a member of parliament and political party. So we have broader dimension to do our movement, actually, to fight for our interest. For example, although our alumni, they have different political parties, but we still can do communication with them. So it's like a new strategy to get our goals, not only by demonstration or protest. So we do political communications informally, although they are not representing us as the organizational movement, but they are still part of our network. So I think it's not really relevant when the quote, the student movement are temporarily. I think if the moment is temporary, yeah, but we are working every day. Actually, we still do a lot of things in our organizations. So that's why we don't have to be defining the student movement, but by seeing only the protest in the street. So we can still do lobby, for example. We can do political communication in behind the table or something like this. It's just a strategy to get our goals. And also the middle class as well. I read the research from the Alfara Institute. In Indonesia especially, there are 3 prominent actors who can make a major change in Indonesia. First is middle class. Second one is the urban society, and the last one is millennial. So this is not the it is the same level. I mean, not one actor co-opted by other actor. We do by our own, by our interest. What we fight for is different by different way. I mean, not like, for example, we have no money, then the middle class give us money, then we do their interest or something like that. We don't do that. So we are in the same level, but in different way. Maybe the middle class, they can do something by their money, in terms of if you define their money is the power, but we have this social capital. That's why sometimes we do collaboration, not like we fight each other. So that's why it's different, not co-opted one by others. And also from Magello, of course, it's different when the old style of Indonesian Muslim student movement by 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, compared to a student movement by right now. Yes, we can. We still do an old style. For example, we do protests, we do demonstrations. But I say again, it's not only the way. It's not only the way. We can do a lot of things rather than only demonstration or protest just to get our goals. We can do political communication, and now I think the government is open to discuss. So we are easily to meet the governor, for example, to the city major, or even to the president. Like 3 months ago, all of general chairman of youth organization invited to the president office, and we discuss, and there is no like pressure from the president, you have to do this, we have to do this. We still discuss by our idealists, by our perspective. So now there are a lot of ways how to practice student movement actually. For example, we can use social media for our campaign. And also we still, if you can see our movement, for example, in terms of categorization or regeneration, in one day there are a lot of training or education program for our members to teach them how to be a good activist today by new by new knowledge, new experience. And we still do it every day, every hour even. For example, I stay in Jakarta in 1 month only in 1 week. In other 3 weeks, I travel around Indonesia to maintain the regeneration or the categorization of our member of organization. So yeah, of course, there is always improvisation and something like that. For example, again, what we do is we upgrade our literacy. So I tell to all branches of Indonesian Muslim student movement to create some books or journals and it's no problem if they only can write it in our, how do you say, only in local area or local level. They write about the local issue, they write about the problem in the grassroots, not only see or fight for national issue. Because now today, not like in the Suharto regime when every region almost facing the same problem. But now Indonesia, maybe the problem in West Java different in problem in Borneo, for example, or problem in Papua. So we have variety of issues that our member fight for. Yeah, there are a lot of strategy actually. Maybe I can explain you not only by webinar like this. Maybe I can tell you in cafe or in our office how our strategy. Yeah, that's my answer. Thank you, Majelo, Ali, and Pak Fajar. Back to Saima, Shamim.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Fajr, would you like to add something?
Yes, just a little bit. So I think Majelo asked something about the impact of sectarian politics for student movements, right? I think the cost of sectarian politics is very costly because it can divide movements And I think this is not only true for student activists or student movements, because I think this is a homework for all activists who want to organize a social movement. The basic assumption of a social movement, I think, is how do you, or the basic fundamental question is, how do you organize people with different interests? It's easy to organize people with the same interests, but people with the same interests or same characteristics, you only count not as many as people with different interests. So I think it's not only particular to student movements, the challenge to organize people with different backgrounds, religions, political interests. I think it's also true to all social movements. And if you cannot overcome this challenge, or if you cannot answer these questions, I don't think you can mobilize a large scale mobilization that can make political elites afraid of you.
Thank you. So we are going to take last two questions now before we end the program. We have Sister Vivian with her question. Please, Vivian. Yeah.
Thank you, moderator. Here I would like to ask to Sahabat Abdullah Shukri as the leader of Indonesian student movement. I found you are an inspiring leader. Beside you leading a huge number of PEMII members around Indonesia, you're also active both in national and international events. And currently you are one of Indonesian delegation for Y20 Summit. So, and you will bring the topic of diversity and inclusion. So may I know how and what kind of diversity and inclusion will you raise as you are a representative of Indonesian for this international event? And my second question is, as you explained before, that PEMII has many good programs. So can we, IIII student, enroll and participate in PEMII? Maybe my international students want to enlarge their connection with activists in Indonesia, like PEMII. Okay, I think that's all my question. Thank you.
Can we take one more question before you answer, Mr. Abdullah?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah, all right. So we have one question from Sabina Puspita. She says, could we say that the Indonesian student movement had been co-opted by the state, or was there any event of the Indonesian student movement capturing state power? Would we see a difference in outcomes when a student movement has been co-opted by the state or has captured state power? Thank you.
Sorry, for the second question, can you repeat from
Yeah,
who?
it is from Sabina Puspita.
Okay, and again, sorry.
Okay, so the question is, could we say that the Indonesian student movement had been co-opted by the state, or was there any event of the Indonesian student movement capturing state power? Would we see a difference in outcomes when a student movement has been co-opted by the state or has captured state power? So in short, it is, could we say that the Indonesian student movement had been co-opted by the state, or was there an event for the Indonesian student movement capturing the state power?
Yeah. Okay. First question, in G20 in Indonesia, the diversity and inclusion theme is a new one, the new one. Before, there was not the theme. The other themes like digital transformation, sustainable and livable planet, and youth employment has been discussing in the G20 event. But because Indonesia now is the home of G20 in 2022, the government wanna show to the world that we have a unique or specific value in Indonesia, like Pancasila, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, and Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia, and Undang-Undang 1945. So the government, they want to promote these values to the world. So they asked the Indonesian Muslim student movement to be one of delegates of Indonesia to talk in the G20 event. So what I'm going to talk about diversity and inclusion is based on the Pancasila, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, and the format of our country, Negara Kesatuan Republik Indonesia, and our constitution, Undang-Undang 1945. But specifically, we are talking about the diversity in education. It's like we are creating the proposal how to provide a universal education to all young people in the world, although they are from different background in terms of religion, in terms of social class, in terms of the region, and something like that. So we are mostly talking about the diversity and inclusion in terms of education. And of course, the second one, Indonesian Muslim student movement are really welcome to every triple IU students to be participating in Indonesian Muslim student movement agenda. Maybe I will inform Aldi if there is an event from PME, and you can join. It's like maybe FGD or seminar or maybe training. And for example, last month from the Department of Economy, we had how do you say, a training for small middle entrepreneurs for our cadre, our member who have digital business in digital platform, for example. And we also not only talking about politics. Actually, we talk about economy, we talk about culture, we talk about education, and a lot of things, not only politics. And of course, you can join with a PME event or agenda. We are very welcome. And the last one, okay. Actually, no, we are still independent, although we have, how do you say, we have special communication to the state, actually. Because we have the same interest in terms of nation. If we are talking about the nation, for example, the unity, the harmony, we do the same things. But then again, for example, if the government or the state create a bad policy, or the policy who are not accepted by majority people in Indonesia, for example, the Omnibus Law 1 year ago, although we are from different ideology or different religion in terms of organization, we do protest to the government. But again, not only protest in the street, but also we do our research, and we also invite some minister to have open discuss, and then everyone can see what is the result of the discussion, for example. So I think today we are not co-opted by the state, but sometimes we do collaboration now, but sometimes if they create some bad, how do you say, policy, there is still room for us to do a protest in a lot of way, not only protest in the street, something like that. Of course, when the student movement has been co-opted by the states, I often see, for example, the governor or the mayor say something like this: "Hey, Indonesian Muslim student movement, you don't have to be critics, activists, because we can provide everything for you. What you need, we can give to you. And what is your agenda? We can support," and something like that. So you don't have to be criticize us, for example. And I got angry at the time, and I say, Mr. Governor or Mr. Mayor, if you young people in Indonesia are not criticized, or they just doing something happy, or everything are calculated. So there is no young people who responsible, who take responsible for to fix the problem in their life. For example, they just be young people who like maybe just traveling or eating, just partying, but not criticize every situation or every problem that they have to take the responsible to fix together with not only them but also with together with this all stakeholders. That's why I don't agree when the state or even the other actors are to how do you say intervention to do intervention to our organization. But again, sometimes we do collaboration if the policy or the interest is good for public, for national interest. But then again, if we think that okay, there's something bad, then we can do our advocacy by research, by protest, by discussion, and maybe by political communication, and together with other element, with other stakeholders, not only us. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. Dr. Fajr, would you like to have some final remarks, please?
Okay, thank you, Saima. So maybe I just want to answer questions posed by Sabina. I cannot remember the moment where actually student movements can capture state power, at least internationally, because it's a very rare circumstance. I think, but maybe if you look back on history of Indonesia in 1966, I think you can see there was a moment when students, they can enter the state, but that didn't necessarily they manage to capture state power. I think that that's my recollections so that I have for now. So the next question is, will we see a difference in outcomes when a student movement has been co-opted by the state or has captured the state power? First of all, I don't believe student movement, they can capture state power, because when they can or could capture state power, I believe that would be when they make big coalitions with other social forces. And I think if that scenario happens, I think student movements only becomes a very small part, or very the weakest part of that coalitions. That's why I think to have political impacts, to produce political impacts for students, they need to be co-opted into politics. They need to make a strong coalition with other social forces. I think the rule in politics is very simple. If you're weak, you follow the strongest one. And I think that's also true for the case of student movements.
Thank you, Dr. Fudge. the session had been very useful, very enlightening. Our guest speakers have given us a new perspective to look at, a new view of points, and we look forward to have more discussion with you again someday. And with this, I would like to end the session. Thank you very much for your time, for your work, and for answering our questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Fajar.
everyone.
Mr. Abdullah Shukri, thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.